You're watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. The live stream. Detroit is different and Bridge Detroit. Local politics of Detroit. All right. Welcome back to another edition of Public Comment. And today is definitely a day where we're talking about different spectrums of what's happening in municipal government for the city of Detroit. Both really involve the office of the executive, our mayor of Detroit, and also our legislative body, the city council. I'm Khary Frazier of Detroit is Different. And here every week with Public Comment, we got two of the best to help hold everything down, which is really based on a lot of the premise from something written by the brother that I'm about to introduce you to. Malachi, how you doing today?
Good morning. I'm feeling good. Ready to be back at it. Here we are on a Wednesday morning while you're watching this on a Thursday.
But. Yeah, definitely. We record this the day before, but it happens and plays live for you every Thursday morning. Thomaesa, how are you?
Doing great. Excited. Happy to be here. Happy to be back in the studio. Excited about the topics today. I feel like we're going to get into some really good topics. So I'm just ready to get started.
Oh, yeah. This definitely hits off both kind of like, I guess one is more in my realm, but we're going to kind of get into the weeds of things, as they say. So here we go. In Public Comment, we're starting off and we're talking about Detroit business licensing reform. One of the biggest topics in a lot of the discussions for mayor and city council are the headaches that people go through with business licensing for the city of Detroit. So what used to be something annual now is shifting to every other year. So 2 years, not annually. Businesses can operate while licensing is finalized as well. So provisional licensing and also health licensing removed, and it cuts license for restaurants. So some of the health barriers, and let me tell you something, even doing the collard green cook-off, as y'all see the collard green shirt today, it is a lot with the health department. I know that like most of this all kind of comes from policy and design. It comes because something went wrong and our government's responding to what people are saying like needs to be resolved and fixed. We remember a couple years ago, a lot of those efforts with Scott Benson and like the tagging of restaurants outside and things like this, but to white box a space, as they say, get a space ready. The amount of regulations, departments, it can just be a whole lot, right? So Fred Durall is saying we got to start setting the tone that Detroit is a place you can do business in, and that's definitely been uplifted. Council member now, but also mayoral candidate. And why these reforms matter: barriers removed, right? So it's been saying just to get a patio for a restaurant can take so many inspections, departments, and bouncing through for so much. Malachi, you were there in full effect. What was the tone about and what was the feel with these changes?
Yeah, so the city council has been working. I feel like this is like happening in a lot of different examples where we're looking at the city's rules and regulations and we're peeling things back to make it smoother, less cumbersome, and particularly being framed around this is going to help small businesses that don't have the resources to navigate the city bureaucracy, the red tape. It's been a major theme, like you said, during the mayoral race, as Council President Sheffield and Councilmember Durhall run for mayor. They both have made making it easier to start a business like a big piece of their campaign pitch. And they were both on hand when this proposal was announced with Mayor Duggan maybe like 2 months ago or so. So kind of an interesting example of how mayoral candidates are still able to like get policy across the, through the door, things that they can propose on the campaign trail and actually, I don't know, maybe convenient on the timing in this case, can actually address because they're in positions of power. But yeah, essentially, business says it takes, I think, 60 days. I've also heard it can take up to like 6 months on average to get through this regulatory process. There's multiple inspections, multiple departments, thousands of dollars in fines. And, it just makes it hard to start a business and keep businesses open. Again, especially if you don't have the resources to have, like a legal team on staff, people whose job it is to remember, oh no, we've got, a renewal coming up in 3 months. We better get on top of that. And when you have to renew every year, it's basically like every 11 months you have to start thinking about this again. So it creates a lot of, issues, and the balance of like, how are we regulating businesses so that they are safe and within the law, and how are we kind of being overbearing? It seems like we're kind of dialing that dial back in one direction a little bit. And interesting too that there's no longer a license through the health department for restaurants, given we had a whole conversation last year about licensing and inspecting restaurants and displaying the green placards. I'm sure you'll see now across the city businesses that are in compliance with health department like standards, no rats on the floor and that kind of thing. They get a green placard now, but they're not actually required to have a separate business license through the health department. The city said that was redundant. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, this was a pretty popular thing. Obviously, it passed unanimously. I didn't hear any like opposition to it. Just generally seems like good policy to kind of roll things back a little bit.
Okay, from the entrepreneurial lens, it's so tough because similar to a lot of the business owners that are now in the market of offering people rental properties, you got two types. You got the person that may own like 3 or 4 homes and offer that up for rent, and then you have corporations that have swaths of property. It was another announcement through corporate counsel the other day, and Mary Waters, in reference to that was hiding. My dad was like, "You seen this?" And I was telling him that. And I raised this up to say, even in this, it's like the ordinances, the departments, and dealing with even what the legality of this is. You have two fronts. You have like a larger business and a small business. A lot of the framing of getting businesses back to work, when it's sold and pitched to us, is from the lens of a lot of small businesses, right? But oftentimes when we see a lot of these changes, the businesses that exploit it are the larger corporate entities, oftentimes not even necessarily based in the city of Detroit, but definitely looking at a Detroit market for getting business. So from my entrepreneurial mind, what I'm thinking, and this is definitely one of those things that could be looked at and explored, are how to explore like a more focused, I'm not necessarily saying like the federal government opportunity zone, but I've seen something like this in Akron, Ohio, like where like Detroit could turn some of the facilities and places and spaces into like business facilities that could offer like gateways for businesses to like, yeah, like some form of something
they
that
do some of that at like
done.
New Lab and Tech Town, but it's very like targeted and specific for like certain types of business.
And when I've gone to New Lab and Tech Town, it's not a lot of what it looks like some of the small businesses that I see around like my community. So like really in response to community, looking at something very similar to that, but just in different business districts, especially because we have these business district liaisons. What happens to like rezone something like that? Because that's really what we want. As far as I'm concerned, you want the small business that is from Detroit, those entrepreneurs, to take advantage of this. Thomaesa, you're into policy. What does that look like to spark something like that?
Yeah, so if we're talking about sparking small business development, I think that this policy change is one that's going to be positive if we're talking about small business. Like you mentioned, a lot of times, large businesses who already have a lot of resources, who already have access to legal teams and assistants, they already know what they need to do, right? They don't have to go through any incubators. They don't have to go through anything. They already understand, what they need to do. But as far as small businesses are concerned, that's not always the case. And this is a really exciting topic for me because I'm very interested in small businesses. As you guys know, I've been interviewing city council candidates. And every time I do an interview, I do it at the Moondog Café on Linwood, which is a small business that just opened up in a formerly thriving commercial corridor, Linwood, that is now sort of just trying to come back into its own. And so every time I come there with a candidate, I let them talk to Rob, who is one of 3 owners of the Moondog Café. And he talks all the time about the fact that it was so hard for them to open up. The licensing process was a maze. It took forever. They couldn't operate. They couldn't make any money. This is a commercial business that they're renting, and the landlord wasn't doing what they needed to do. And they are business owners. Rob himself is a musician, right? And so they were trying to open up a venue for things to come to the community, but they didn't have a lot of, information on that. And so I think one piece of this that we didn't mention already is the concierge service that they talked about that's going to help small businesses navigate a lot of this process and a lot of these changes, right? You talked about an incubator. You talked about helping small businesses understand a lot of this. From what Amanda Elias was saying yesterday, that is going to be a component of this, of having internal advocates within the city advocate for small businesses to be able to move through this process seamlessly, to be able to have those provisional licenses so that they can operate and that they're not opening up their business with rent already due and things of that nature. So I think that this is a step in the right direction towards getting to where we can have more small businesses open up in our commercial corridors, because that's what we need, right? When we talk about small businesses, if we take a step back, what we're really talking about is economic development and bringing revitalization to our communities and having areas where people can shop and walk through their communities and have access to the things that they need. And so I think that this is a step in that direction, because if your policies and regulations are cumbersome, even though we do need regulation, right? We don't want people operating, willy-nilly. We do need regulation. But however, if you can make things easier, then you can increase the economic development in neighborhoods, right where it's really needed, where people in the community can have access to the things that they need. So I do think it's a step in the right direction. I do think there's a part of this that's going to help small businesses understand and navigate better. And so I think that that's positive and a good result.
I should also mention that the city put money into a budget for a business concierge team that's separate from like the ordinances that got passed yesterday, but it's kind of like in concert with what they're trying to do. And basically, it's a team of like 5 people that are going to help businesses navigate that regulatory process. And they said, we're going to start with 5 and we'll see how that goes. If they had 25 people on that team, it probably still wouldn't meet the demand. So I kind of wonder, you're talking about businesses that need some help, or are they all going to get that help from the city? We'll see.
And then, like I say, I mean, back to like we're moving forward with this collard green cook-off, but also a lot of some of the systems within the city are not necessarily the easiest to navigate. Like some of it could be like just an internal analysis of the city itself, walking through the process. Like this special events that we're going through, the portal breaks. It like how you submit, how you interact. And some of this I know is built on the systems of the payments and the protections of government systems. Like now I'm getting into like even in the state of Michigan. The state of Michigan has gotten a lot better, but still it's very clunky because a lot of government-based systems use intranet systems just to protect the data and analysis. A lot of people don't know a lot of government, municipalities, and state governments, even federal governments, have been compromised through hackers and attacks through hackers. So like some of the portals and the systems are not as simple as even a business owner could use, and walking those steps through with departments, and then even what the data is. And it's like, okay, I know I submitted this form, but the form isn't there itself. Like I think an analysis internally, because I know just through this special events process and all of the steps we're going through, it can't be a way that somebody knows that this is what the steps in the process could be. And as much as it's navigating the system, also these systems are ever changing, just depending upon what's enforceable and what's not enforceable, which is another one of those key questions, Thomaesa, that I have for you when it comes to so many of these ordinances and so many of the rules and regulations on the books. It starts becoming like, what do we enforce? What do we not enforce? Which kind of a little bit goes into the next story we're going to talk about. But
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think even though the policy position is changing and we're changing some of the regulations and things of that nature, I think it's all going to come down to implementation. It's all going to come down to how is this really going to look for small businesses? Are the portals going to be working? Are the things going to be available for me? Is the 5 concierge people, is that going to be enough? Right. So we have to think about this in terms of what is it going to look like. It's one thing for a city to pass a policy that on its face looks as if it's going to make a process more streamlined and better. But when the rubber hits the road, when it comes to I'm now going to be seed and I'm talking to someone behind the counter, are they going to be able to help me with the process? Is this going to materialize the way that we think that it's going to materialize, or are small business owners still going to have those problems because the internal processes weren't changed? We did change the policy, but is that all we changed? Did we change anything as it relates to our internal processes? Did we change anything as it relates to how we're going to implement this in the community? How small businesses are going to have transparency? What are those implementation points going to look like, right? And so I think although we have made a change that is something that could be very positive, if we don't follow up with that implementation and those changes as it relates to how this is really going to look when the rubber meets the road and when a small business is actually trying to open up, then I don't know that it's going to have the impact that we think it's going to have.
And I have to uplift something that I'm finding out more about, but data-driven Detroit in the neighborhood vitality index that they have, and you can search it and look at neighborhoods. It even has quadrants of different districts and things. Like, I believe for this to be effective in how we hear this, block clubs should be involved. CDCs, community development corporations, need to be involved, and organizations. The business liaisons from DEGC, like, it needs to be a lot of citizen involvement of what moves forward, because we're looking from those citizen-based businesses, because that's also the changes with so many of these ordinances. It just makes it look better and, more for larger organizations and corporations to exploit the entryway of, like, okay, now we got to do it every 2 years, and it still becomes very strenuous for, as you say, the business on Linwood to get into operations. With that being said, it's still like, I as much as I'm looking at this, thumbs up, more people, and I definitely want more people from my community to be involved in business, but just from an entrepreneurial lens, there's other questions that's had. And BC, it was a small discussion. You all raised this up, but obviously less money because, you're not charging every year, which really, to do something every year, you all know with taxes, you kind of got to really be thinking every 10 months. But also a curfew crackdown. Mayor Duggan proposes stricter fines for parents. First offense, $75 to $200. Second offense, $100 to $500. The maximum allowed. It applies year-round to ages 15 and under. No public spaces after 10 p.m. without parents. And 16 to 17, no public spaces after 11 p.m. without parents. And also, I put this in red, curfew violations now treated as priority 1 emergency calls. Police will enforce the curfew in ways this city has not seen before. That's a direct quote from Mayor Mike Duggan. Police overtime extended for block party and drag racing units as well. This is something that just makes all the question marks go off in my mind, because I believe that something more constructive could be done to resolve this challenge, and also knowing the relationship between young people, especially young Black people, and police officers, teenagers, that doesn't hold well. Like, I see police escalating the situation and giving a fine, and what that, like, it's already going to lead to an interaction between the youth and the child. And really, the only response that police have are resolutions that at best can only be ticketing. At worst, you all know the tragedies that happen. Malachi, I'll start with you. What's the tone, the feel for something like this? Because this just seems like, it don't seem like it's going to be something that's very progressive and constructive for the city of Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, this is a crackdown. That's the way the mayor has described it in a Monday press conference where he announced some of these changes. The intent is to enforce the curfew in ways that nobody has seen before, he said. I am curious whether most folks even know if there's a curfew. I mean, we talked about it around the fireworks, but it is in effect year-round. The hours change with daylight savings time, so in non-daylight savings time, it's a little bit earlier in the day even. I think there's some billboards around town that advertise it, but I would suspect it's probably not widely known. Like, parents probably don't know that they are subject to these fines in the first place. But, I think every summer we see an increase of violence, of shootings in particular. And, usually around this time, the mayor and the police department put together a plan to address that issue. Last year, a lot of the focus was on illegal block parties after there was a mass shooting on the Northeast side. That, basically the idea was to create more enforcement of those parties and crack down on them in a similar kind of way, make them a higher response for police and put more police out looking for them. Now it's children. There was apparently 20 shootings involving juveniles this summer. That's why the mayor is doing this. And so the solution seems to be, let's put more police out who are looking for unaccompanied minors late at night, and let's slap a heavy fine on the parents who are letting their kids roam without supervision. The council seems pretty poised to pass this. I talked to 3 members at least, which is not a majority, but I talked to 3 members that are pretty gung-ho about it and see this as a solution. But I think there's going to be a lot of conversation, maybe some frustration from residents. It's got to work through the process. So it's going to go to probably the Public Health and Safety Committee and then have some discussions there before going to the full council. So we'll have a couple of weeks to kind of understand more the pros and cons on this and hopefully get some more data. I put in some records requests to find out how many curfew violations there have been in past summers. I just think there's a lot of questions about how effective that curfew is as a tool to reduce shootings. And does slapping a harsher penalty on people, is that going to change the behavior, which is what we're looking for? We're looking for parents to keep track of their kids at night and keep them off the streets. Is a heavier fine going to do that? I talked to some council members yesterday and brought up, I said, look, maybe this is a bad comparison, but we just got rid of, or not completely got rid of, but we reformed like rental inspection processes because we found that the fines and the targeted enforcement wasn't changing the behavior of the landlords to get their properties into compliance. And I think there's been other examples of that. You could even maybe see glimmers of that in the business regulation pullback, where we've seen that like a heavy-handed approach to our regulations in the city haven't really always got people to do what, to follow those policies. So what's different about this? Why are we sure that increasing the penalty is going to cause parents to change their behavior? And I don't know, Councilmember Durhal and Young said that was a bad comparison, and they think this will actually make people more aware of the curfew and more likely to follow it. But I just think we're going to have to see. I mean, there's a lot of questions still about how this is going to get carried out. Making them priority 1 calls too, and having police, roll up on kids and potentially put them in the back of squad cars too late at night is a concern. There was Free Press reporter was talking about how police involved shootings involved some minors late at night too. So could we see kids with guns coming in interactions with police late at night? I don't know. There's a lot of questions.
It's a lot of questions. Basically, you have social work background, and I'm just thinking from a parent that is dealing with that teenager that's out at night. Can you just get more of a framework, even like more so of a solution that you think and just some of the impacts of something like this?
Yeah, this one, I don't know. This one is a little tough because we have to think about how this is really going to play out. We talked about if you see a group of kids, 15-year-olds out at night after 10 o'clock or at 11 o'clock, and somebody sees them and calls the police pull up with their blue lights on and startling the young people. How is that interaction really going to play out? Like, what does that look like? That could actually be exacerbating a situation. And I feel like we just talked on this show about the ways in which police officers interact with our citizens, right? We just talked about that in the last show. And so I don't know that this is the right solution. As I mentioned before we came on, I sent this information and spoke about it with one of my friends who works at the Umoja Debate League, which is a youth development organization that operates on the west side of Detroit. And, he was saying, this is not the way. There's resources that we can put out there. There's community organizations that we can invest in. There's other ways to interact with parents and engage them into these processes and talk to them about, making sure that their kids are not on the street because we want to increase safety. But in terms of making curfew calls priority one and increasing the fines, I don't know. Like Malachi was saying, I don't know that that's going to change behavior. I feel like a lot of it is about striking fear. It's about looking tough. Is about being tough on crime. We do have a lot of things that happen. Malachi did mention the shootings that have taken place and things of that nature. And so you want to show that you're trying to make people feel safe. You want to show that, the rule of law will have its place in Detroit. However, you have to think about how that's going to impact young people, one, and then you also have to think about how this is going to impact people's households. I mean, these fines on people who are already cost burden, I mean, how is that really going to help, right? Especially when we know that you can't really police your way out of crime. People need resources. People need assistance. Young people need something to do in the daytime and at night. So it's not. I don't know that this is the right balance for that. I think we need to have a more youth and community focus as it relates to that. And so that's kind of where I stand as far as solutions are concerned. And I don't know that this is the best one.
It's interesting because we have a community violence intervention team that, its job is to keep track of what the youth are doing and get in the middle of conflicts before they turn violent. And it was last week that the CVI groups got together and outlined their plan to address summer violence. And that included knocking on doors in neighborhoods where there have been some shootings recently, but to also recruit 12 to 17-year-olds to join after school programs. So I don't know what the messaging, from the mayor's standpoint, if they see these two initiatives like in concert with each other. I wasn't at the Monday press conference where the mayor outlined all of this stuff, so I can't really speak to that. But it's interesting that, we have one event with city leaders that really emphasizes enforcement and crackdown and penalties. And then the CVI groups that have been successful and been really charged with preventing these kinds of shootings have a totally different approach. Like, I don't think youth curfew came up in their plan or conversation at all. So it's interesting that this is what we focus on. And again, I just want to bring people's memory back to the idea that every summer we outline some enforcement process that gets at one aspect of this problem, but there are so many things that go into gun violence. It's easy to look for what fix. And I think that's why council will support this, is that they want to be seen as doing something. And maybe this is, a step in the right direction, but it's not the whole step that needs to be taken.
I think that it's a lot of risk with this. And then, like I say, I went to Northwestern and live in a neighborhood where it's summer violence, but the summer violence with youth, as I always uplift when it comes to gun violence, and soon I'll be doing this forum with Donovan McKinney about guns and things like that. America is a violent culture here. We keep moving away from the concept of America being a violent culture. And that's also what makes, through the protection of police, the reason that the protect and serve is the fact that police can escalate things to be violent acts themselves in protection of property and others. And I also don't necessarily think that it's a correlation, especially from what I remember in summer incidents and shootings and things sometimes it's most violent, during the daytime, basketball courts, crossing other kids as a kid that you don't know. It's not immediately at nighttime. I guess I want to see what stats and data they have, but it's a random act of violence. I think the best way to curb that behavior is like what Thomaesa said, just come up with more constructive things for kids to do. One of the number one things in this city that they say, I guess, is the comeback city. If it's after 9 o'clock, you almost can't find anywhere to eat. That's not a Coney Island, right? You got kids that are already up past 11. I think it could be something that, could be more constructive, possibly under the idea of youth business, young people having jobs or something. Something could be done constructively where I think that if they're outside, they could be a part of something instead of looked at as they're being destructive. I think it could be a constructive solution to this and not necessarily a destructive response. Though what Malachi says, you have to act swift. The tragedy of the 4-year-old losing their life, but this is also just the lens and how we look at things in America. Nobody's at the baby ward saying, this many children were born today. This many people survived this tragedy or this illness. Like the lens of our culture itself has a focus on violence. So we're responding so much to violence that we're not even thinking of what could be constructive until, possibly the last 2 minutes of like a news telecast or the back page of some article or something like that. Like, I do think that constructive things could be done. Hence, and I'm not necessarily just saying this because you're here, but that's one of the cool things about Bridge Detroit. Bridge Detroit has a lot of just cultural stories, information about what's constructive, businesses opening, cool things that are happening in the city that aren't always just from a deficit mindset. And I'm saying a deficit mindset of what is wrong in our society, heightening so many of the fears that exist. Because I just think already, if I'm on, what is that? What is the term that was used here? If this is an emergency one call, that a 16-year-old is out at 11:05 and I'm a police officer and I got overtime for this, I don't even think as an officer I have the I can't respond to that 16-year-old with the, hey, why don't you go on and get home? Donovan McKinney just told his story, and I'm uplifting this again, about even when he was at Renaissance and he was living in East State Fair. Just due to like the busing system, it would sometimes take him to get to Renaissance High School where he went to and to get to East State Fair, and so much walking that he had to sometimes do between bus depots. It would sometimes take him 2.5 hours to get home, right? So he, at 10th grade, he would have been caught just going back home, back to some of these other systems. So you would have find his mother that's already in one of these situations where, resources are scarce. Like, that would have happened to him, that went on to become, now a candidate for Congress, but the Democratic leader of the Appropriations Committee of the state of Michigan, Renaissance graduate, University of Michigan graduate. He would have been one of these kids in that, just because of the busing system and him going to school because he wants to go to Renaissance High School to heighten his chances at what he wants academically. Like, some of this stuff, like, I don't know, and then I can only imagine the parent that has the teenager that's out to deal with like a, and then that's like a second fine. So if you have, oftentimes, kids are out with their siblings. So if you have like a 15-year-old and 16-year-old, and this is the second the second incident for both, you could be dealing with $1,000 in the middle of the night just because, they taking the bus back from, if they do have a job, working at McDonald's or something. Like, this is a lot to me. I don't know, Thomaesa or Malachi. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, we have to really think about this. Like, if there's a group of kids out at 11 o'clock, why? What are they doing? Are they walking home from work? Are they, just trying to make their way home from school? You just never know. And the situation could just become escalated just by someone, wanting to respond to this curfew issue. And it could just be escalated. Like, you don't know where these kids are going. A lot of times there's not anything happening. They're just trying to get where they have to go, right? So I asked you, Khary, before we got started, if you were out, you were a young man growing up in Detroit, what were y'all doing at that time? You said you're more likely, if it's later, you're more likely to be around people you're more likely to just be, going around your neighborhood. There's not really a lot happening. But once you make this a priority one emergency situation and the police come, now it's a police matter.
It
and
sure
you were just
is.
trying to get home. And so I just don't think that policies that will be helpful.
And furthermore, the number one thing that I felt, and I guess we can kind of get to a close of this, is this also criminalizes young people. That's exactly what it does. It took a while for it to hit me. And I love to get, as you speak about like Umoja Debate Week and Teen Hype to talk about this. I think Teen Hype does excellent programming, and everything done over there with Amber Redrick and that group. But like, it's criminalizing them because you're automatically saying if these young people are out, and it's going to change how violence is. It's just like, okay, so the thought process is all these young people are violent, when violence, I think in that we could respond differently. But I guess I just don't want to look at all of the young people in my community as criminals.
And they get delivered, I think, I mean, normally when they do the curfew for the fireworks, they get dropped off at a police precinct. So I I don't know if that's going to happen in this case. Probably. I think that's the way it's just enforced right now. So we're not just talking about kids getting picked up by police and put in the back of a squad car. They're not going to be driving them home. They're going to be driving them to a police precinct. So, yeah.
You got that right. So with that, oh man, this was a heavy one, but we got to really unpack this, and I'll definitely be I'll be looking to see how community responds. We'll definitely be coming back to this issue. I certainly see, and then hopeful that, you know, the mayor's office and city council can think of more constructive things that could be done, especially with community violence intervention. As we so many youth resources. I talked about Teen Hype. You spoke about Emoji Debate League, Life Leaders Detroit, and Maria Franklin. The work they're doing is so many people doing constructive things with young people. I mean, even Grow Detroit Young Talent throughout the summer. Like, expand upon that. You know what I mean? Or if through the police cadets. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a lot of constructive things that I think could be done to address some of these challenges more so. With that, this was a heavier one. I'm saying, you know, keep watching Detroit is Different. The Collard Green Cook-Off is coming. You know, we're going to unpack that. We record on Wednesday, so you all missed a candidate forum that we did yesterday, which is today right now. But you all will see some clips from that pretty soon. With that being said, Malachi, tell the people what's up.
BridgeDetroit.com is where you can find our reporting. It's all free, no paywalls. We rely on your support and the support of foundations. We're a nonprofit newsroom, but all of that content is available for you right now. We do a weekly city council newsletter that serves as kind of the basis of what we talk about here. There's always stuff that we don't get to, and so I would definitely recommend subscribing to that. Also free. It'll show up in your inbox every week. We also have other newsletters that will make sure you're getting all of our reporting on life in Detroit. Make sure to show up for our election events. We have one in District 7 that will be done by the time this records. But then we also have a big mayoral forum with the Parks Coalition coming up. So we're going to be talking to them about public spaces and parks in the city, recreation centers in the city. And we have another event for at-large city council candidates as well. And I think Board of Police Commissioners are our last ones. We've kind of worked through every other council office throughout this summer. So Detroit is Next also is a platform in partnership with Detroit is Different, where we are interviewing candidates for mayor. And we're going to be, we have been interviewing different community voices as well. I'm looking forward to leaning more into that as we start to get out of the primary here. But go vote if you haven't registered to vote. You still have time. Please go do that. There's all kinds of information available online. Just Google it or go to BridgeDetroit.com and we can help you out there with some of our voter guides.
All right. So Mason.
Yes, we own everything, still providing political education to the community. Just recently did a interview with Esther Hagebuck at the Moondog Café on Linwood. She is a District 5 candidate for Detroit City Council, and she's also my neighbor. We met each other through the LaSalle Gardens Community Association. So she's talking about her platform. Be on the lookout for the footage and the information from the candidate forum that we have or had. That information will be really good. We're going to be talking to a lot of great candidates and giving you guys a lot of information and ability to hear from them directly if you haven't already. And then just one last note on this issue with the curfews. I want us to consider when we're thinking about policy is effectiveness, right? What have we seen over the years that have been more effective? You know, as Malachi uplifted the CVIs and community-based interventions, those types of things are a little bit more effective, we've seen, than policing and fining and things of that nature. So I think when we look at what we're going to invest in, I think we need to think about what has been most effective. And so just looking forward to continue with these conversations and glad to be here.
All right. So with that being said, Detroit is Different here. Public comment. Keep watching. Keep watching. We're going to have a lot of things more. And also, we're doing something very special. Public comment. Detroit is Different. Looks like Detroit Next and Bridge Detroit. We own everything coming up the night of the election. Thank you so much. Peace. You're watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. The live stream. Detroit is Different and Bridge Detroit. Local politics of Detroit.